This is Gateway City Sports.
It's a trap!
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
This is the Team of Rivals podcast.
Everything you want to hear from the big sports to the big screen.
He's all by himself, fires into the end zone. Caught! Touchdown! No!
On into the windup and his first offering. Just a bit outside. He tried the cornerless.
Doesn't like you. I don't like you either.
Time winding down. Michael for three.
Yes!
She is gone. I can't believe what I just saw.
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy!
You believe in miracles?
You may fire when ready.
What?
Hey there, Cubs and Cardinals fans. Welcome to the Team of Rivals podcast. It's Sunday, July 30th, and we're ready for the deadline. But before we get to the deadline, obviously, we're going to get into the stupid stuff that happened because the Cubs and the Cardinals played 4 games, and it started out with a banger. But I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to do that to you. You can follow us on social media at Team of Rivals Pod or find us online at teamofrivalspodcast.com. For those of you who prefer to watch the show, we also occasionally post to YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble, like right now. So hit the like and subscribe buttons and be sure that notifications are on so that you know anytime we post new content. And you can find more great podcast and blog content on the Gateway City Sports Network, where we are proud members. Joining me for this week's show, co-founder of Team of Rivals and number 125 in the 2022 edition of C70's Top Cards on Twitter, Ron Nuttall, and permanent occasional guest host, Elliott. Guys, let's just jump right into it. Look, it's the trade deadline. It's coming up in 2 days. Obviously, the Cardinals have started moving, but clearly the most important thing that we need to talk about, and Ron, you really disappointed me. I know I mentioned it earlier. You disappointed me with the way that you sold us short by being reasonable in your take on the whole Wilson Contreras, Ian Happ, Miles Mikolas fracas. So I'm gonna tee you up for that again in case you missed it. I know Cardinals fans and Cubs fans, you all saw it and you've all weighed in, but you haven't heard us weigh in. Ron, just a little bit, but Ian Happ took not for him, a normal backswing. I mean, let's be honest. Yes, his backswing is ridiculously long, but that's an Ian Happ backswing from the left side of the plate. He caught Wilson Contreras in the head, caused him to bleed, and then Miles Mikolas, he decided that his pussy was going to hurt, and so then he decided to act like a pussy. So, Ron, the reasonable Cardinals fan take, please go.
All right. So I wasn't able to see much of this stuff. As you guys know, I was gone for an entire week. I was down in Florida. It was a little bit of a working vacation for me, but the family got out of here for a week. My wife's meeting side of her family down there for a week, and all the kids got to hang out and everything. But I didn't get to see much of any baseball. I caught it a little bit at night, what happened. And it wasn't until the next day, I think I texted you guys, that Elliott was talking about how Cardinals Twitter was just erupting. And I remember talking to my son, my 18-year-old, at some point that night, I think it was Friday night, and said that Mikolas was ejected in, I think, the first inning. I'm like, well, that's interesting. So I didn't actually get to watch it until I was back. And so I kind of watched the first inning as it played out, because I wanted full context, right? I didn't want an edited clip or anything. Looking at what happened there, it's clear, very, very clear that Ian Happ was targeting Wilson Contreras on the backswing. No, I'm kidding. It was completely unintentional. That's probably, and I was nowhere near going to look at historic Ian Happ at bats to measure the backswing, but that's probably what this dude has been doing like his entire career. And yeah, he caught him. It took him out of the game. He did play the next day. But Miles Mikolas, decided that he was going to hurt one of my guys, I'm going to send a signal to one of yours. It's never a right way to do it when you're intentionally throwing at somebody, but you do hope that if they are doing it and don't intend harm, they throw at the meaty part of the thigh or right at your ass cheek, which is basically what Mikolas did. And he didn't throw in a 95, 96 mile an hour fastball. He kind of hit him softly. Happ didn't seem to take exception with that. He looked rather happy to take his free base. But with that,
but he did miss on the first one that was high and tight at the shoulder.
Regardless, but you know,
don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
If you're gonna hit him, at least he hit him there, right? Like so,
right.
Some call it old school baseball. They call it, like players taking care of their own and players come from all different organizations, all different backgrounds, the way they played in college, the way they played in high school, the way they played in the minor leagues. And of course, Mikolas came up in the Padres organization, then he went over to Japan, then he joined the Cardinals. So you never know where these guys come from. Some do it, some don't. Like it or not, it happens from time to time. He should have been ejected. He should have been ejected immediately from the game because clearly he was intentionally meaning to hit a Cubs player. And so he did. And, the umps can't make an exception one game and say, well, you just hit him in the ass cheek really soft. It's no big deal. And then the next game have somebody throw at somebody's head. And then, well, we let it go last night, so I got to let it go tonight. Like, you can't do that. It puts the umps in a situation where I know we don't tend to agree with umps and their judgment most of the time, but I think they made the right call here. There's nothing to complain about. I mean, Mikolas was stupid. He shouldn't have done that. It's the first inning of the game. They needed a start from him. We all know the Cardinals pitching's thin. We all know they're out of it too, but you're playing your division rival. They took 3 out of 4 the week prior, and you want to, you'd won the game the night before. Let's at least split this worst case scenario, and let me get a 5-6 inning start here. And he took himself out, and therefore it forced the Cardinals to put in Dakota Hudson, who clearly wasn't ready. He's the kind of guy that has to get ready, but you had to rush him in from the bullpen, and then you cough up 3 runs. So it's just a bad judgment. Bad decision on how to react to that judgment on the part of Miles Mikolas, and he should have been ejected. And I have no qualms with the call the umpires made. None whatsoever.
But Ron, the ump show. That's all I saw. And I know, Ron, you tell us don't pay attention to Cardinals social media, but that's all that Cardinals fans were saying on social media. Oh, here comes the ump show. Sorry, the rules are pretty clear. Anyway, Elliott.
You're saying social media. The Cardinals broadcasters were also in on this. And then the next day, Chip Carey doubled down on it on 670 The Score with Spiegel and Parkins, backing up what he said during the broadcast, being like 24 hours after reflection, still stand by his call. And I'm like, you are better than that, Chip Carey.
I'm like, so. Surprises me. I didn't hear the 670 interview that you're referring to, and it does surprise me because he seems like a pretty level-headed, reasonable guy, right? But
he doubled down on the let the players police the players, and he doubled down on there was no warning. It's like he didn't have to give him a warning. It was obviously intentional.
Yeah. Well, the problem I have with that logic, Elliott, and I agree with you, right? So. The problem I have with that logic is you're not dealing with players in the early 2000s and 90s and 80s.
No.
You're dealing with the players of today. And these guys throw their soul out with every pitch.
It's still a 92 mile per hour fastball to the butt cheek, but
my point is, Elliott, there are some control freaks in this game, but we know for the most part that has gotten away from the days of having, 5 or 6 Greg Maddux scattered throughout the league just isn't there anymore. And so you're not dealing with the same mentality. You're not dealing with the same players. You're not dealing with the same crop of pitchers that you are before. So I think the time has come and gone, the time of our late friend Mark Littell, where you clean up, you police it yourself, right? I don't trust the players to do that these days. Not with the showboating that happens that's accepted. Not with the, porn throw and porn swing. You just do your hardest every single time. You actually don't pitch, you just throw. I don't trust players to do that this day and age. And that's where I think Chip's missing it. I think he's He's thinking about it as the way things were. And when you had guys like Smoltz, Maddox, Glavin, like you could do that to a point and it was okay. It was kind of accepted. It's just not now.
I think after he missed with the first one,
this generation is too thin-skinned. Yeah. They take exception to everything. They take everything personally, and you just can't play the game that way anymore.
Yeah, Elliott, I think where you were going there, and I totally agree. And Mikolas kind of gave up the game in his post-game presser, and obviously Chip doubled down on it the next day, is the whole complaining, well, you didn't give us a warning. Well, when was I supposed to give you a warning? Was I supposed to give you a warning after the first pitch was up and in at 96 miles an hour and missed him? Because right there, you're giving away the game. I was trying to hit him the first time and I missed him. And I should have been given a warning. And I missed, and you didn't warn me, so then I hit him, so you should have warned me again. Okay, so what you're saying then, that logic is he unintentionally knocked your catcher out of the game. You get to intentionally hit him, and then the warnings start. So you get away with throwing at somebody. And now the next person can't retaliate, and that would be the Cubs. And that's usually the way that it worked in baseball before was, okay, you hit my guy, I hit your guy. Now you issue the warnings, and now everybody's happy.
Well, and that's why I thought Boog Sciambi and JD was like their call was super spot on. Like JD was like, "Ooh," he's like, "I think that was the matches. He might not have, but because we had a little bit of." A slow up there, so maybe that one just got away from him. And then as soon as that next pitch comes in, and JD is like, "Yep, that first one was intentional. The second one is intentional." He's like, "These guys are going to get together. They're going to know that it was intentional. They're going to toss him out." And like, it's exactly what happened because that's what the rules say.
Yep. And it's funny because I went I looked back. I actually went online to YouTube and stuff, and I looked it up. And for all the bitching and moaning about how Ian Happ's backswing is so ridiculously long and that he's irresponsible in the way that he swings, it doesn't take long to find a 5-minute compilation videos of batters of catchers getting hit by backswings, and none of them are Ian Happ. I recall at least one time.
Yeah.
Wilson Contreras getting hit by a backswing when he was with the Cubs.
Yes.
And I do know that there were at least 2 instances of Wilson Contreras getting called for catcher's interference.
Correct.
So, and I'm not blaming the victim here, but Wilson Contreras does have a tendency to jump forward when he's receiving the ball.
And get hit.
He gets eager. So this is not the first time he's caught a bat.
I think your point's right, Pete. Like Ian Happ is certainly, you look through the history of these players with these big, long swings like Will Clark, one of my favorite. Ian Happ, it's not exclusive to him, that backswing. It is a little ridiculous. Look, I'm biased because I don't like the guy's face, but
I'm with you there.
This happens in the game. My son, 12-year-old catcher catching the teenagers, got called for interference, I think 2 or 3 times in the spring last year, of just, instead of letting the bouncing ball come to him, reaching up to get it and then getting clipped a little bit, and runners get to advance, batter gets to take the base and everything. So, this does happen. I think it was a bad call by Mikolas. I don't know what else is going on in his head. I'm really surprised at Chip Cary's response. I didn't hear this, Elliott, on this post interview that he did. But yeah, they're wrong all around. And point to Twitter. And it's funny because these hypocritical bastards out there on Twitter, they love that they're so logic and right about who's smarter than who on Twitter constantly. And I'm sure it's not exclusive to Cardinals baseball. I'm sure it's everywhere. But for as objective and analytical as most of them claim to be, I am surprised they let their bias towards their team skew their viewpoint that much, where you get a fucking simpleton like me who played the game in a different era than what we're playing right now, seems to understand this better than them. Dumb call by Mikolas. That's it. He fucked his team. And that, there's no more to say about it from my side. I am disappointed. I would think that Miles Mikolas, being a veteran, would be a little bit brighter than this. I would expect this from one of the young Cardinals pitchers, but not him. So anyway, not much more to say from my end. I agree with the sentiment. I agree with where you guys are at on it, and I think the Cardinals continue to look. I'll just call it stupid as hell this year.
Well, and the funny thing is there was a lot of Cardinals Twitter saying, "Well, if this would have happened to you." If this would have happened to the Cubs, they would have done the same thing. Well, it did happen to Yan Gomes. He did get hit and he got knocked out of the game. Guess what the Cubs did? They kept playing. It's an accident. These things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And Ron, I think that you were absolutely right. It was the one thing that I loved the most about your response. And I loved your entire text that you sent to us, but then also subsequently put on social media, so I couldn't read it as my intro. But anyway, the one thing that I absolutely loved about your response, hey, you know what? Don't give up 3 runs. If you're going to pull something like that, then you better get out of the inning. They made you pay for it.
Even further.
Yep. Not only did you force somebody to come out of the pen who was not ready to pitch, but you immediately put your team in a hole. So you compounded your mistake.
And it's not like you were 60-46. You were the other way around. And you don't have a team with Albert Pujols and Chris Carpenter and Jim Edmonds and these guys that no matter how shitty things look, you're going to get pulled out of it because you have way too much talent on the roster that can overcome a lot of the stuff you don't right now. Again, Pete, I don't mean to sound like a generationalist here, but I don't even know if that's a term, but that's kind of what I think we're seeing here. These you haven't earned it, so don't act like it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. All right, so moving on to more pressing issues, especially the reason why we got on a Sunday night is because the trade deadline is just 2 days away. And we were speculating about this the last time that we were on. What was it? 10 days ago, 11 days ago. And now it's official. Not only are the Cardinals selling, which we expected, but the Cubs have basically made it official. They are at the very least standing pat and likely buying. Although there was an interesting news report, and the reason, look, Cardinals fans, I know that you're probably the majority of our audience, but we're getting into the Cubs first because it's the easiest part. There was a report earlier today that the Cubs have told interested teams that Cody Bellinger is no longer on the market. Interestingly, not included in that report is whether or not Marcus Stroman is still available.
Well, Bruce Levine had an article in USA Today that included Marcus Stroman being taken off the market.
Well, we'll see.
Well, okay, and that's one thing I was fishing around for too, because I saw that about Bellinger. I'm like, well, certainly that must mean Stroman's off the market too. But make another point before you get deep into what the Cubs are doing here, pivoting. I think they're a good example of when people get frustrated, why deals aren't made earlier before the deadline. Like why wait till the last minute type of thing. This is why the Cubs had won 8 in a row up until today. And they had put themselves, they're only 4 games back. They were 3 games as of this morning, but they're only 4 games back of the Reds in this very volatile division. So if people are wondering why teams don't make these calls until the last week of the year, a lot of these series they're in this weekend did determine what direction they're ultimately going to take at the deadline. The Cubs are a good example of that. The Padres they just swept the Rangers. So the Padres are one of those that might be out of the selling market too. I read earlier on, I think MLB trade rumors that Hader might be pulled off too. So, this kind of shit happens. And for Cardinals fans that are out there, barking about, why have they done anything yet? Well, this is why. Your suitors some of them don't know what they're doing until this weekend's over before the deadline.
And if you're a smart team, right? Like say you're the Padres and you were thinking about trading Soto. And let's say that they're still thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
If they made a trade for Soto, if they decided that Thursday that they were out and they were going to make Soto available, right? Well, one, you're absolutely right, Ron. That's before they swept the Rangers. And
right.
2, on Thursday, Cody Bellinger was still on the market. And so there was a viable option for other teams. Yeah. Well, now Juan Soto has suddenly become much more expensive because Cody Bellinger's gone, and now the Padres are thinking that they may try to make a push for it. Now you're not just going to have to give them a really good return. Now you're going to have to blow them away. You're absolutely right.
Soto has control beyond this year too.
He
right?
does. I believe it's 2 more years, maybe 3.
I think it's the end of next year. I could be wrong.
I think it's the end of next year.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he had 2 years left when the Padres dealt for him last year, and he had this year and the next year. Yeah, but that's a good point, Pete. He's all of a sudden become much more expensive, which makes that decision that much harder for somebody like I don't even remember who the Padres GM anymore. I like the other guy that was there before.
Preller.
And then you got DePoto, right? He's the one there now. You got to be thinking in your head. It must be like a mental game of ping pong with yourself, right? Like do I do it or not? Because I can get a lot for him right now because to your point, some guys have been taken off the market. It's not like a plethora of bats available out there, especially in expanded playoffs like we're dealing with now, which is another factor, another layer on why this gets complicated. 20 out of 30 teams have still a pretty decent mathematical chance of seeing their way in. And when the options start to get slimmer, these guys get more expensive. So yeah, I'm sure for DePoto out there, it's probably like, shit, I could really cash in on this right now, but maybe we have a chance. Maybe we can get in. And I'm sure the Cubs are running into the same thing. Yeah, they might be more willing at this point to kind of stick with a few guys they have and give them a qualifying offer when it's over. But you took your chance in 23 when you didn't think you had one, because you went on a little bit of a run here recently. So this has gotten, to steal a famous Mo word, this has got complicated.
It has gotten complicated. Oh, and Ron, I wanted to tell you before you came back, just apropos of nothing, I did share this with Elliott while we were waiting for you to rejoin us before we jumped on. I did, obviously not wearing it now because it would be completely uncomfortable out here on the balcony, but I did wear the bow tie to church today. And hey, look, he came through for us. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity to pivot to it. The sell-off has begun. Jordan Montgomery, Jordan Hicks, Kyle Stratton, all out the door, and this is clearly just the beginning. The Cardinals sell-off is not done. Your thoughts, Mr. O'Donnell?
Yeah, not many. I think the two names that are gone so far are three. We kind of expected. These guys were all free agents at the end of this year. I know there was talk about Hicks talking about an extension with the Cardinals. It's been his only club, so I'm sure there's some sentimental things going on there where it's an organization he feels comfortable with. They've stuck through him through a lot. Through 2020, he was a diabetic, didn't play in 2020, opted out. Before that, he had Tommy John surgery. So they've been very protective of him. So I'm sure there's loyalty on his part too. And it probably goes both ways. There's talk about an extension possibility. So I thought, well, maybe they don't deal him. But he was the first name that came up today. So they got a pretty decent return without pulling it up right in front of me right now. They got a couple guys from the Blue Jays organization. Now, in the Blue Jays organization, I think that they were ranked in top. I could be getting this confused with possibly the Rangers deal, but they got a pretty decent return, I think, for Hicks. A couple, minor league pitchers. They're not ready right now. They could be ready for 2024. The Cardinals are getting them into their system and probably find out a lot more. They deal Jordan Montgomery and Stratton to Texas, who is hungry for pitching right now, even after acquiring Max Scherzer on Saturday. DeGrom's out for, I don't know how I missed this, but DeGrom is out for the year. So they need it. They seem to be all in. A few things I've read tonight on Twitter, I've largely tried to avoid it, are Cardinals fans are upset with the return that they got, and that's typical baseball fans this time of year. Make a trade, screaming to make a trade, make deals, pick a lane, tell us where you're going. Then they make a deal, and they bitch about the deal. Okay, right on brand. So I'm asking everybody this. I'm like, ultimately, this question won't be answered until we learn who these guys are that they dealt for. And are those guys that they dealt for, that they got from the Rangers, they got 3 guys, are they better than 2 compensation picks that you would get if these guys walked? Probably not one for Stratton, but you would have got one for Montgomery for certain. So are the 3 guys you got back better than a compensation pick? And I'm going to say yes, especially for 2024-25. You get a comp pick, next June? June is typically when I think the baseball draft happens. So that means those guys are 2 or 3 years away from contributing at the major league level if they're good enough. So would you rather have had that happen? Look, a team hungry for pitching like the Rangers, which are going to be likely the teams that are going to be dealing for them at the deadline, they're not going to give you pitching in return that's major league ready. And if it's major league pitching, if it's readily available major league pitching they have, you think you're going to be getting an ace or a number 2 starter? They're dealing for a number 2 starter, likely in a lot of clubs, a number 3 starter. You're not going to get the same thing back. So I don't know what the fuck Cardinal fans are complaining about. What did you think you were going to get for a 2-month rental on what would typically be a number 3 starter with a contending team? You're not going to get an arm back that's major league ready. You're going to get a couple guys in the minor leagues with a high ceiling. That's the best you can hope for right now. And if you don't want that, if you don't think that's good enough, throw in another one of your outfielders, throw in another position player, another pitcher down in the minor leagues and try to get something a little bit more. But when you got a team that's all in like this, they're not going to give you anything that's major league ready. You're not going to get that. So I don't know what people are bitching about or complaining about. They restocked their minor league system with like 4 arms at least. One was a lefty who's been up and down with Texas this year in terms of roster. But, you got 4 arms now that were in the top 10 in their organizations as far as prospect rankings. So now you have depth that you just didn't have before. Does it hurt your major league roster? Of course. But fuck, you're not going anywhere this year anyway. So what are we losing? So I don't understand the pissing and moaning about this, but you'll never make everybody happy. I mean, shit, they would have had to trade Montgomery for Juan Soto for people to not complain about it. And we all know nothing like that's happening. So we'll see. It's just like anything else, man. They make a deal for a couple of young arms. We'll see if they pan out or not.
Ron, I'm gonna ask you a quick question, then we're gonna pivot to Elliott. How many Cardinals fans' brains will explode if the Cards ship Nolan Gorman out for anything in the next 2 days, considering that reportedly he was the obstacle to the Cardinals trading for Juan Soto last year. Oh, Ron's on the phone. Can't answer the question, so I'll tee him up again. Elliott, obviously we know nothing about these picks, but what's your sense? It seems to me this doesn't improve the Cardinals for 2024, not significantly.
My first thought when I kind of saw what the Cardinals Twitter was saying after these trades was the meme where the guy's standing there on the noose and say he's got the Cubs fan logo on there, looking at the Cardinals fan going, first time. Because it really is. I mean, I can't think of in recent memory the last time the Cardinals made trades to restock their farm system. So, yeah, you might not know who these guys are, but look them up. See what their potential is. Look when they were drafted. Look what they've done in the minor leagues. Look at their trajectory because, it's not a straight line. That's not how baseball works. I mean, these guys might not be ready next year, but maybe they'll be ready in a couple years. So, because obviously what the Cardinals have been doing for the last 3 years isn't the answer. At some point, it needs to be reset. And it looks like this is the time. It's probably not something that Cardinals fans want to hear, but you've got what you think you're trying to build around is 2 aging corner infielders. That's not the answer. Trust us.
Well, and that's I really want to wait to dig into that one until we have Ron's full attention. But the other thing that I want to jump into, and this is something that came to me, I was out at my dad's actually this weekend, and it came to me as I was driving back today. The Cardinals right now remind me a lot of the Blackhawks post Stanley Cup wins. And bear with me. So the core of that team, right? The players who really helped the Hawks win 3 Stanley Cups, right? So Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, Duncan Keith. Those were all Dale Talon draft picks, right? Those were all guys that Dale Talon brought in. And then Dale Talon got fired. Stan Bowman came in. A couple of years later, Stan Bowman added around the edges, and the Blackhawks go on an incredible run for 5 years, winning 3 Stanley Cups. Stan Bowman gets all the credit. But if you step back and look objectively, those were Dale Talon's Stanley Cups. And he deserves a lot more credit for it than he got. And I kind of feel, and if you look at it subsequently, right, after the talent fell off, Stan Bowman really tried to build around the existing core as they aged, and the team just didn't go anywhere. But not only didn't go anywhere, but it got hamstrung to where not only were they not playing well, but they also weren't improving. And then you look at the Cardinals right now, and it seems to me that the Cardinals are a lot like that. John Mozeliak got to play with a lot of the toys that he had been provided by his predecessor. This is to take nothing away from his fleecing of the Diamondbacks and the Rockies in getting Goldschmidt and Arenado, except that he got them on the downside of their aging curves. They're still incredible, but how much longer are they going to last? And it kind of feels to me that they're in that same situation, that you have a team that is not building towards the future, and at some point you're going to need somebody else to come in, like Kyle Davidson has done with the Blackhawks. And yes, he absolutely got lucky in getting Connor Bedard, but still.
Kyle from Chicago.
Yeah, Kyle from Chicago. But still, Kyle from Chicago had a plan to tear things completely down to the studs, because he realized that continuing to do the same thing and trying to build around an aged core that wasn't going anywhere wasn't going to do anything. And it kind of feels like that's what the Cardinals are doing right now, is they're trying to rebuild around an aging core, and it doesn't feel like they're going to get there.
Yeah, 100%, because it's what they did last year. They kept that aging core, and what you're seeing is diminishing returns. You're seeing the diminishing returns of hanging on to these pitchers that have aged, these corner infielders that have aged, and not bringing in the young talent that you probably would have seen in your predecessor. So it's unfortunate. And I think the biggest, if they would have gone after pitching and replaced some of their aging pitching, the Cardinals are probably not in this situation, which is conversations that we've had for the last 3 years. They needed to address that. That has always been their biggest need. It's been the Achilles heel, and you're seeing that this year in spades.
And it kind of makes me wonder, like, I know that the Cardinals feel really good about their corner infielders, and well, they should. But it seems to me that it's kind of organizational malpractice and also a betrayal of the fans to not try and do what's best in the long term. Because if you put Arenado and Goldschmidt on the market, they immediately become the two best available bats on the trade market right now. And you would 100%. Think that you should be able to get a return that helps this team next year, that puts this team in a place to compete next year, because you can get major league ready pitching for those two players.
Yeah, and based on what you've seen with some of the trades that have already happened, the market's been set. And for Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt, because they're under control, you can get AAA, like probably top 5 within their minor league systems from anybody. And you could probably get a couple of them for those guys. So I feel like it would behoove the Cardinals to trade one or both. And if I'm a Cardinals fan, I want them to do that. As a Cubs fan, I don't want them to do that, and I just want them to, have that still and then not reinvest into their minor league system.
Well, evidently nobody could hear us on the live stream, so I killed it. So it's just going to be an audio only. I've already deleted the 2 feeds.
Okay.
Now I thought the same thing, Elliott. Like, what kind of a return could you get? How anxious were the Dodgers to get a homegrown boy?
I think you can get a pretty good freaking return for either or both them.
Well,
I think you get because of Probably at least one or two, like, high talent guys that you would probably see within the next 2 years.
Fine, but let me put it this way, right? So how many times have we seen this happen? A team like Oakland or whoever has to jettison talent, but usually on the other side of 30, like what people say, the good side of 30, where they have to jettison talent. And I know that both Gorman and Goldschmidt are on the wrong side of 30, if you believe every young person you talk to. Sorry, I'm arguing with science and numbers. Yes, I know. But whatever. That's fine. There is value to their names. There is value to their stardoms. And that's something I don't believe St. Louis is going to part with. So what I don't spend my time doing is hoping for things I don't believe that the team is going to do. They've always had, now their philosophy, their model, however you want to put it, has been tested and it's failed. But one thing I don't think that they will jettison, I don't think ownership will jettison, is you've got sometimes 2 to 4 core players. They're just not going to deal. That they want as part of the team. They want a veteran presence there, a mix. They've always been that way. So that's why I never believed for a second that would they listen? Yeah, probably. I think it'd be dumb not to listen. But it was highly unlikely they would deal, especially Arenado. I just didn't see that happening. Regardless of who you trade for him and who you get, your chances of getting somebody on an equal level or even 80% of his level is so rare and unheard of that it just doesn't become worth it all of a sudden, especially if your plans are actually to compete in 2024. I almost don't care what kind of minor league blue chip you have. Like, I don't think they're going to do it. So I didn't waste my time worrying about it. And I may not have made that deal either, especially for him. Goldschmidt's a little bit different. He only has 1 year of control left beyond this one. And he is in his mid-30s, right? Maybe just turned 35, or soon to be 36. I don't know. But I don't track these guys' birthdays like social media fans do. But I get the sentiment, right? You could get a haul, but it's never a guarantee. And you're guaranteed to get an equal level talent, sell as many jerseys, whatever it is. I didn't see it as something that was ever going to happen.
I don't think you'll get equal level talent right away, but that's
probably not even going to get close to that. Is what I thought is.
But you hope that you're going to get a couple of guys that are going to come in and help the club and be above average of what's currently there in those other positions, even if you're not directly replacing Nolan Arenado or Paul Goldschmidt.
I'm not worried.
I mean, at some point they're going to have to be replaced.
Well, they will. I mean, everybody's going to. But I didn't see it as time to go that far with the retool, rebuild, renovation, whatever you want to call it. I never saw it going that far. I know at some point, Pete, I even think I had said on here, I'm like, I don't think any name is particularly safe, but if I had to rank them, I'd say Arenado is probably the safest. And I know there's confusion over the weekend too. There was one erroneous report or editor gaffe or whatever that said that he had been approached about his no trade when in fact he hadn't. I don't know why Mo didn't come out a little bit earlier and address that, but he addressed it recently. Typically when something's put out by Derek Gould, though, from the Post-Dispatch, I tend to believe that. He's kind of a robot. Like, he's not going to put anything out there in print unless logic checks off, meaning he's checked more than one source. So I saw that clip you put on our text thing. I'm like, that's not what I heard today, or that's not what I read earlier. So I knew it wasn't right, but yeah, I get what you're saying, Elliott. You hope they stick with the same core like they've had for years and just continue to tread water. I'm still not in a place yet where I look at Nolan Arenado and I'm saying, if you stick with that guy, you're treading water. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you need better players surrounding him. You certainly need a better starting pitching staff.
That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing they've done. They acquire good trades for Goldschmidt, good trades for Arenado, and then they stopped.
Right. And that's kind of where I land right now. And obviously we have no idea where things stand because the trade deadline hasn't come yet. There's still time for more moves to be made. But right now, it doesn't seem to me that the Cardinals have set themselves up to be a better team next year.
No.
And if they haven't, then that means that last place in the NL Central right now is a logical possibility. And if that's a possibility, aren't Arenado and Goldschmidt luxuries?
Yeah, but I keep in mind that there is an off season and there's only so much.
And they've done so well, and Mozeliak has done so well in signing free agents in the off season. I know you're a huge fan.
I know free agent thing scares the hell out of all of us. But there is an off season to deal with here, and whatever you can't get done now. And again, I'll go back to my point I made earlier. Like, there's so many teams that are making last day decisions based on recent performance or recent placement in standings, their probability of making the playoffs, how many games are they back, or the wild card, etc. You think about how many teams you have to deal with right now, and it's not like it was 20 years ago. You have fewer that are willing to do what maybe many more were able to do early. I don't know, other way around. Maybe I'm saying it backwards, but I do believe that, whatever they don't get done now, they're going to try to address it in the offseason. So if they couldn't move Flaherty right now, they'll take their pick. They'll give him his QO, and likely he's gone. They're going to have to dip in I don't think their trades are done at the deadline. I think there'll be a few that happen after this, certainly in the off season. And then they'll have to, we'll see. I don't know how deep they're going to jump into this free agency pool, right? Because the Cardinals this is not their thing. They typically outspend themselves jumping in early. Dexter Fowler. I can't really say they overspent on Contreras, but I guess if you're looking at the numbers, you can argue that they did. Free agency scares the shit out of all of us. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, they're not good at it. They've never been good at it. I don't know. I can't really say they make emotional decisions, but I feel like they have in a few cases of former Cubs where they've done that. But we'll see. There's a whole offseason to deal with, though. So this rebuild thing that they're trying for the first time, that's kind of been the direction that they've never taken, but they have to take now, is going to be a real interesting thing to watch. They seem to be hell-bent on Mo, I think, said on an interview after the game that they're not done, but he wasn't clear on whether they're not done right now or they're not done until, spring training of next year. So it's going to be an ongoing thing.
I can't imagine that they're done for this trade deadline.
I mean, there's always teams who are willing to probably give up a little more than they normally would than during the offseason. And this is the time to do it now, because your offseason, there's always time to think about it. When you're trying to make a playoff push, you're on a deadline. And if you want that player, maybe you're willing to throw in that extra guy, or
depends on how desperate the organization is. Are they all in? Is this if you're dealing with an organization, Elliott, to your point, that has a short window, like we're going for it this year or bust, that's the team you typically want to deal with, right? You don't necessarily want to deal with one that's smarter than you. So I would advise Mo and his crew to probably not even fucking answer calls in the Tampa Bay area code.
Isn't that good advice for any team in baseball?
Correct.
I mean, they all know this. I'm not revealing something to everybody here. They all know this too. And you want to deal with somebody who's all in right now. That's the ideal case. But how many of those teams do you have? LA, you can't say the Dodgers are all in right now. Fuck, they're all in all the time. And they're smart. When has the Dodgers minor league system ever been like in the lower 20? Like never. Like, they seem to always be ahead of everybody in that regard. And the Braves are really good there too, and they're a team that's in it. You got to catch a team like the Rangers or Toronto that don't have these infinite windows of competitiveness. Like, you got to catch these teams. There are not always a lot of them sitting there, even at the deadline. So No, they're not done. There's probably going to be one, maybe two more deals that we're going to hear about over the next 48 hours, and the rest of it will have to settle itself in the off season. But I think Arenado and Goldschmidt are still in Cardinals uniforms next year. They're still part of the plan. They're still part of what they see over the next 2 to 3 years. And I would be completely shocked. I mean, completely off my seat right now if one or both of those guys were done. I just don't see that happening, regardless of the logic you're throwing out there, Elliott. And I don't disagree with the sentiment, but I'd be really.
I get it.
That would require a smarter front office than you are currently equipped with.
You don't have to put words in my mouth. I've already put them there.
And it would be tough. You need a front office with a really thick skin, right? I mean, which Jed Hoyer seems to have demonstrated, right? Because in that situation, Jed Hoyer knew that he was going to get lit up, and he did.
No, for Javi,
and
KB,
he still dealt
Rizzo,
Javi, Schwarber, all those guys. He got lit up for it, and now
Now the Cubs have the number 3 minor league system in all of baseball.
Yeah, you don't hear much from Cubs fans anymore about, especially when you look at what I don't know if Chris Bryant has played 100 games for the Rockies.
No, he's out. He's on the IL again.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys. He's one of those guys you look at. We all know this guy in life, right? Where there's always something with you.
Yeah.
There's always something with you. You work with that guy. You're like, man, there's always something with you. You either had a kid sick, you couldn't go to work, or they had a camp you had to drop them off late for, or you got to close on something, or your fucking water heater busted. Like, he's that guy in baseball.
Yep. And I mean, you look at it, right? Anthony Rizzo went, 50 games, something like that, without hitting a home run. Javi Baez has not been good in New York or in Detroit.
Schwarber's the only one.
Yeah, Schwarber is the only one who has shown anything. And then Yu Darvish is just a freak, right? Like, so, and you hear Cubs fans salivating over Pete Crow Armstrong and Kevin Alcantara and Alexander Canario, and all those guys were returns on those deals. So it takes.
I need to caution you guys on prospects again.
Yeah, I know. But I'm saying these are Cubs fans, right, who are drooling all over these guys. And I will admit that there is definitely something to it. But the cautionary tale is Brennan Davis right now, because once again, he's injured and there's no timeline on the guy who just last year was the Cubs' number 1 prospect.
And got hurt, had back surgery, went out, and he hasn't been the same since he got back.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're right. All prospects are just that. They're just prospects.
But I've just seen Cardinals fans do this so poorly over the years, where they are celebrating these guys literally with like virtual champagne. Just hearing about their name in Memphis. September, like, our best hitter is actually in Memphis. Yeah, our best hitter who's never taken a major league at bat.
Speaking of which, the Cardinals social media is starting to get excited about Mo basically teasing that Mason Wynn's coming any day.
Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, and we're doing it again, man. And
I don't think our teams play the rest of the year, right?
They do not. This was it.
Yeah, he'll likely get a September call up. He's probably earned it. And if they deal away Paul DeJong and Edmonds. I think Edmund is still on it. He's on a minor league rehab assignment right now, so he'll be back up soon. But if they do deal DeJong, and I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility, Edmund could be thrown in a deal too. Perhaps, I don't know. That he might get by the time he gets a call. I mean, and look, they're out of it. Let's not make any mistake about that. They're out of it. What's the harm in bringing him up and letting him play for a month? I don't think there is.
So Ron, if Dylan Carlson gets traded away for
well, let me correct you. The extremely light hitting Dylan Carlson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, when? Because he's listed as a possibility. When Dylan Carlson gets traded away for a bucket of balls and a 25-year-old at low A. How badly will Cardinals fans' collective heads explode, considering that supposedly he was the obstacle to the Cardinals not getting Juan Soto last year at the trade deadline?
Was it Juan Soto or was it Murphy, the
it might have been both.
Might have been both. But I think you're missing the name. Gorman was in that conversation too. So yes, I said this to my son earlier, and I said it on our Gateway City Sports Twitter thing that was reopened. For as much as us Cardinals fans bash on our front office for overvaluing their prospects and young players, and they do, and they have, and they've placed bad bets. Been over this a million times. Cardinals fans are equally as stupid at overvaluing our major league roster. We are stupid as hell. Just fucking go look at the history on Twitter. Case in point, should have got more from Montgomery when you damn well know you shouldn't have. You got probably exactly what you were going to get. Dylan Carlson is not going to be the next Carlos Beltran, right? He's not. He hasn't been great. I'm sure if I sat down and talked to him, he's a wonderful person. None of this shit's personal. So I'd say the same thing about Tyler O'Neill. Really smart guy if you've heard him on an interview. But they're not it. You know what that thing is? They're not it. Like they're not that thing. They're not players that you build a team around. And Cardinals fans think that they are. Well, he's been hurt. Well, he hasn't had steady playing time. Well, you know what? For as shitty as the team's been, when he can't even start on a 47 and 60 team, why is that a person you would ever build around? Why Tyler O'Neill when the guy can't stay healthy to save his life? And he's streaky at that. Like, you don't build a team around these guys, and that's the only ones I want to talk about that are untradeable or worship them or change my Twitter handle to fucking Dylan bomb-hitting masher or whatever these people do. Free Andrew Kisner. Like, I just, you get married to the names and the notion that these guys could come up and be the next Albert, the next Chris Carpenter, the next Jim Edmonds. And it's just not that. And you pop that cork on that champagne way too quick, or that bottle of vintage wine. It's the reason why the shit decants, man. You got to give these guys time. And a lot of Cardinals fans just they're not ready, Pete. They're not ready. Even after 2 decades of this, they don't know how to handle it.
Ron, let me ask something. I threw this out there to Elliott when you were dealing with whatever it was. I assume it was our stream issue.
Nobody could hear us.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, great.
Don't worry, I deleted them.
Good.
You don't even have to look at the comments.
So
okay.
Mozeliak became the Cards general manager in 2007.
Yep, after Jocketty was let go.
Right. The Cardinals then win the World Series in 2011, appear in the World Series in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the theory I put forward to Elliott, and I'd love to get your take on it. Mo kind of feels like Stan Bowman for the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks won 3 Stanley Cups, but they won those 3 Stanley Cups on a core that was drafted by Dale Talent, right? Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, and Duncan Keith. Those were the 3 players who were probably most important to that run. But Stan Bowman's the one who gets all the credit for that. And if you look at what happened after that run, as those players started to age and Stan Bowman's moves started to take effect, the team just kept getting older. That's all that happened.
I know where you're going with this.
And it kind of feels like that's where we're at with Mo, that Mo has had a nice honeymoon period that was all built on Walt Jocketty's work. And that Mo hasn't really done much in the 16 years that he's been in charge of this organization to justify his tenure. And it kind of feels like the same thing needs to happen for the Cardinals that happened for the Blackhawks, that things are not going to turn around. Things are not going to change for them until the leadership changes. If Stan Bowman was still in charge of the Blackhawks would not have Connor Bedard, because Stan Bowman would have continued to try and build a relevant team rather than accepting the fact that we're not going anywhere and it's time to say goodbye to Patrick Kane and it's time to put Jonathan Toews on the shelf and it's time to look for a new beginning.
Yeah. I know. I knew you were going with that one. The bar has been lowered. their standards have dropped. You see it in their play this year. You've certainly seen it in the results. I mean, he won, I think, in his first 8 years, like 30-some playoff games, bunch of series, a World Series, and then a World Series appearance, a couple pennants. And then after that, I think they've won one playoff series, and that was against the Braves in 2019. Since 2014, they've won one playoff series. Certainly they've made it, but that became their standard, just being good enough to make it and get in. It has been that way, Pete. And I'd throw another name in there. You said Walt Jocketty, but I'd also say that Mo rode on the coattails of Jeff Luhnow and his work for a few years, right? Up until he went to the Astros and thought he was stealing their shit. And the guy went to jail for 4 years or however long it was, which is a deterrent. If you ever want to do that as a baseball executive, probably don't hack into another team's database. But I'd say Jeff Luhnow was a part of I think Jeff Luhnow's work extended Mo's success for a few years, his work in the minor league system. And then when those guys were gone, you kind of clearly see what's happening. I think they've got a good scouting director in Randy Flores, former player. So I think their scouting has been okay. Their development, once they get in there, you can kind of question a little bit. Certainly their ability to take a really unbiased take on what they actually have compared to the rest of the league, not their own system, is another thing I don't have a lot of confidence. And certainly their evaluation of talent in terms of free agency is also pretty poor, or trades for that matter. So, yeah, I don't know what you're trying to get at, but it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me. And yeah, I know their standards have been lowered, and they've tried to rationalize the shit out of that for many years, and it's not working. The whole world sees it. But maybe Bill DeWitt's going to be the final stop. Once he realizes that, then a change will be made. This is going to sound crazy. I haven't been calling for anybody's job. I typically don't do that. I don't take pleasure in somebody getting fired. Let's see what he has to do his first time around of trying to do a retool or a renovation or a rebuild, whatever you want to call it. Let's see how he does this. If he can't do this after ignoring glaring needs for years, then I'd say that it's got to be the nail in the coffin. If he can't get this one somewhat right, and I don't expect them to be a World Series contender next year. It's a tall order. You can't fix this team in 1 year. I don't believe that at all.
So in saying that, though, with your corner infielders, there's a window with those guys, and if it's more than a certain amount of years, you're probably looking at those two guys.
Stubborn or not, I know where you're going. Stubborn or not, you're bringing up what you brought up a little while ago.
Yes.
Stubborn or not, Elliott. They're not going to trade those names away. So I'm gonna have to go. I
didn't think the Cubs were going to trade Anthony Rizzo away, but they did.
I'm going to have to go logically what I think they will and will not do. I don't believe they'll do that, so I'm not even going to I can't take my head there. They're going to try to do something with those guys there, but the reality of trying to fix what's wrong with this team is, as far as an entire pitching staff and a bullpen, you guys know. Can you fix that in a year? You
could probably get close, depending on what contracts are out there for other teams and who's going to be a free agent, that sort of thing. It typically takes you at least 2.
I think so too, or even more. But can you do enough in the off season to potentially put them back where they thought they would be in the National League Central? And I'd say that maybe a little bit better chance in doing that, depending on what the rest of the division does. I'm not even calling for Mo's head. I don't like to do that. But let's see how he handles this situation right now and then up through December. Then you may hear a lot more from me at that point.
Speaking of calling for people's heads, and I think this might be a good place to end on it. Elliott, do you think that David Ross has bought himself some time, and that the questioning of David Ross's job as the manager of the Cubs will quiet down now that it looks like this team may make the playoffs, but at least has been competitive this year?
I think so. I think he's bought himself some time. If they totally fall apart between now and the end of September and end up 15 games under 500, absolutely not. If they make this competitive all the way to the end, then yes, I think so. It also depends on what Jed gives him, because they've already made a roster move where they've removed a man for the 40-man in anticipation of somebody else coming in. So we'll see what happens here in the next 48 hours. It'll be interesting. I mean, obviously the glaring needs are either a left-handed third baseman and some bullpen help.
Left-handed third baseman.
Lefty hitting third baseman.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Like, how high are you?
Hey. The greatest relief pitcher in history is also a left-handed third baseman. He has played third base.
Okay.
He still sports a 0.00 ERA.
Guys, what's the status on Stroman? We touched on it earlier. You didn't really is he? He's staying, right? I mean, they're gonna. Staying at this point.
Okay. If they dealt him, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if they held on to him. It could. I feel like it's a coin flip.
I think it's less likely than it was last week. Less likely than so that he'll be dealt. I think that come Wednesday morning, Marcus Stroman will still be a Cubs pitcher, but there's a greater likelihood of him being dealt than of Cody Bellinger, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. One, I think the Cubs feel like if they deal Marcus Stroman, they feel like they may be able to, while not the level of or the quality of a return, they obviously feel like they can replace the hole that he creates, right? They brought Hayden Wesneski up, and besides a leadoff home run to Lars Nootbaar, he looked good in his 2 innings of work against the Cardinals the other day. And clearly he fixed something when he was down at AAA, because he was much better at AAA than he was previously.
Stealing down there.
So they clearly feel comfortable with where he's at, so they feel comfortable with that. If they trade Cody Bellinger, one, who are they going to replace him with? There's really nobody on the roster who's going to play the defense, and obviously
you get that game-winning home run robbing Tauchman or whatever.
Yeah, but Tauchman is not going to.
Tauchman.
He's not as good as a defenseman as Bellinger at 2 positions. Remember that. Yeah. But also the bat's just not the same. And I don't think that Pete Crow Armstrong is ready to get brought up for a playoff run. He'll provide the defense, but I don't know that he'll necessarily provide the offense.
In the highest level he's been at is AA, right. Which yes, he is killing it at, but I think he needs to get promoted to AAA and see better pitching and show what he can do there.
And also maybe you bring him up in September. Who knows? But then the other difference I think that there is between Stroman and Bellinger, and I think it's minor, is Stroman can't be given a QO.
No.
So they are losing him at the end of the year for nothing. And so that has to weigh into it. They can give Bellinger a QO. And not only is that compensation pick of value, but also that QO changes the calculation of what kind of a contract you offer him in the offseason. And I think that they might go after him just to buy PCA and some of the other Cubs' young prospect outfielders a little bit of time.
What I dude's only 27, right?
Yeah.
Like I thought for sure he was like 32.
No.
It feels like he's been in the league forever.
He's still a kid.
Guess when you're a Dodger, he's still extremely young. So yeah, it's like interesting to see this Cubs pivot. But I was wondering about the pitching. It's not like Stroman's having a nice year. He's also in a walk year.
Although he hasn't been great his last 4 or 5 starts.
But yeah, right, and he's also in a walk year, that kind of thing. So there are certainly teams inquiring about him, and I would think that whatever. I don't know. The return have to be pretty overwhelming.
Yeah.
I think for the Cubs to consider trading Stroman, and I don't know what you think, Elliott, I think that they would have to get, you're talking about a serious reliever, somebody who can change the Cubs' fortunes and resettle that bullpen this year, right? Not somebody who's controllable for the next couple of years. That's who they're going to want, right? They're going to want a first baseman or a third baseman who can contribute at the plate, and they're going to want a reliever who can turn Albert Alzolay, who has been great, but who is going through his first time as the Cubs closer, push him down and put off that pressure for another year. Somebody who could really.
One game I have watched in probably the last 2 weeks, the Cardinals finally, and I don't remember this. I don't have a memory of the Cardinals ever beating Kyle Hendricks, but they beat him today.
They did.
If there's anything to kind of grin about, like finally, like how did we get this guy who always looks like he smells a fart? Like they finally beat him. This control freak who always seems to like stymie the Cardinals. He's throwing pixie dust up there. They're always unbalanced. They just couldn't figure the soft posture out.
Well, they dinked and dunked him today for sure.
Got him. It was 3-0.
And Steven Matz just completely handcuffed the Cubs offense. Hats off to him.
Well, Matz has been good over the last, call it 3.5 or so weeks since he went back into the rotation. He's actually been pretty good, but he's one of the 2 guaranteed starting pitchers they'll have next year. Yes. If that gives Cardinals fans any more confidence.
All the more reason to keep Arenado and Goldschmidt.
I don't know what does.
Please don't trade them. Don't get anybody who's going to change your fortunes long term. Keep them around until they retire.
Change your fortunes, maybe, but not likely. With that said, all right, Pete, get us out of here.
All right. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends to do the same, because we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. And we also occasionally live stream, like we tried to tonight, on Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube. Be sure to check out the other Gateway City Sports Network podcasts, including the Derek King Sports Show. That's a winter podcast, Talking Sports on the Bleachers, 2 for 3, and Yacker Jacks. You can find Elliott on X.
Oh, Jesus Christ. TOR_Elliott.
And you can find Ron at
TOR_X Ron 75, some shit. I don't know. TOR_Ron 75.
Get in touch with us at the show at teamarivalspodcast.com or on any social media channel at Team Arrivals Pod. Gentlemen, thanks for jumping on a Sunday night. We'll definitely, obviously, do this again. I would imagine we'll keep our regular Thursday night slot because that'll give us an opportunity to let it age, right? We can open the bottle, we can let it decant, we can determine what actually happened at the
don't do that. Nah, Cardinals fans don't do that. It'll be an ugly show.
Yeah, they're gonna shotgun that beer.
They will.
Oh well, then maybe we should open up the phone lines.
No, it's the worst idea. I won't do that anymore. Of course, we haven't heard from CJ in a long time. I don't know if he's still alive.
Please stop calling.
I'm not going to flip over to that because I'll hit the wrong exit music again.
Of course you will.
All right, Pete, thanks for leading us out of here. Okay, well, you know what? If enough interesting shit happens, we'll be back here in a few nights. Until then, we love you all so much. Bye-bye, everyone.